Well, welcome everybody to the circle. My name is Brian Piergrossi. Happy to be with you. Grateful to be with all of you. Um, let's see, what am I? A lot of things. Personal life coach, author, breath worker, retreat facilitator, and so much more. One of
And
the
always
things,
in a good mood.
what?
Always, always in a good mood.
Okay, I'll
Either
accept.
that or you're a really good actor.
I'll accept that. Um, yeah, the circle is really about um, supporting people to positively transform their lives and what makes that happen and how does that happen and what's the technology or the strategy to make that happen. What are the insights? What are the maybe things that aren't as easily observable, um, that transform our lives? And I've laid out 10 areas in my coaching that cover all the areas of one's life. So we have the mental, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, the relationship, the community, the family, the work or purpose, the financial, the I think home is the last one. I may have missed one, but anyway, they cover the different all the aspects of one's life. Um, there is a Patreon group if you like what's happening here and you like it to continue to happen. Looking for the chat box. There's a Patreon group to support. I'm going to put that link in the chat. And then if you like Venmo, that's a Venmo option as well. So I like to start with the gratitude. I think that creates a nice vibrational field to dive deeper in. So I'm just going to open it up. Let's say just two things. I know there's so many things we could be grateful for, but if you would like to share two things you're grateful for, and in verbalizing your gratitude, it creates a vibrational shift inside yourself and for everybody else. So you're making a positive difference in everybody else's field in the circle. So just know you're making a positive contribution to the space if you feel inspired to share. I guess I'll start, right? So I always like to express gratitude for all of you for being here, um, in person, or not in person, but live, being here live with me. Um, yeah, it's a lot more fun than just being by myself. And I've really been appreciating the interactions. I'll say more about that in a minute, but I won't go too long on that. So that's one. And I expressed gratitude for family last time. So let me try something different this time. Kombucha. I'm looking at kombucha back there, my kombucha. I love kombucha. I'm so grateful that it exists. So those are my two things. You know what kombucha is, Mark?
No.
This is it here. This is such good stuff. Has like a ton of probiotics and it kind of has a what's the word? It's like bubbly, almost like a soda, but really healthy for you. Really good for the belly. Um, yeah, just very beneficial, I find, mind, body, spirit.
Is it easily available or
It used to be very
special?
hard. It used to be very hard to come by, but I think most grocery stores carry it now.
It's a
So
good
Okay.
substitute for pop.
yes,
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
fermented tea mixed
yes,
with fruit juice, usually. It's
yes,
delicious.
yes.
It's
Just ask your son, he'll give you some. He usually
okay.
has it around.
Yeah.
This
It's
one, this one is ginger aid.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh,
Yeah,
I just got one of those the other night.
that's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Antonio.
Hi,
Hola, amigo.
hello everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, who's up next?
I'm
Sorry,
grateful for that little bit of silence we had at the beginning.
Oh, nice.
So grateful for the silence, man. I just floated in a sensory deprivation tank for an hour and a half, and It was complete silence other than the universal hum that I was able to tune into.
Hmm. Yeah, maybe we could make that a thing because it always feels a bit awkward for me because I feel like something needs to be said and people are new and probably tell them that it's okay to hang around and something good's gonna happen. But I do like the silence. A lot of times, a lot of stuff that I've done, we've started with an intentional period of silence. So maybe we can have just a couple minutes of silent prayer and meditation, grounding and centering. So yeah, thanks for articulating that, Jacob. Something's coming in on the what shall I call it? The texting wires or the written wires. Uh, I think that's a private message to be from Annie. Okay, don't read that one. Marla says, I'm eating, so I'll stay off camera, but I'm grateful for the abundance that is flowing into my life in the form of a raise and a bonus. Nice. And I'm grateful for dreams coming true. One specific dream is being approved for a USDA loan so I can purchase a home for my daughter and I.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Anybody else want to express gratitude?
I guess I'll go with my second thing. I'm grateful for taking really good care of myself and having the ability to do that. I had a solid self-care day today. Gratitude for that.
Nice.
I'll chime in. I'm actually grateful that the way my life is currently arranged. I see it now. I moved here to Cabo in 2012, in preparation for this like intense healing period that started a few years ago. And it doesn't cease to amaze me how it's all laid out, how my guardian angel, my divine self, I mean, within 10 minutes of where I live, I have like this holistic center that I've been going to. I have, like a sweat lodge. I've met people that have, we do regularly cacao ceremonies and circles, healing circles, um, sound healing. There's a lot of really good sound healing sessions around here. And so, within a very short radius of where I live, all these healing tools have been arranged, for me. And so I'm very grateful for that. They've been instrumental in this process. So I'm very grateful for all of the healing tools that I have at arm's length.
Thank you, Antonio. All right, that feels good. So let's uh let's carry on. So I really liked what we did last week about exploring how to get accurate information, how to get the most accurate, best up-to-date information. It just feels so fundamental. It's like something that's sort of easy to overlook, but if you skip that step, then all the other steps are going to be wrong after that, you know? So it feels so fundamental. I feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface of it. So it feels like that's a multi week exploration. Um, and then once we kind of get that down, then we can go into other things as well. But it feels like it's just really critical in the time we're in right now because again, there's so much intentional manipulation that goes on through the different um, media outlets and um, government agencies and corporate commercials. And it's interesting watching the Super Bowl and you're watching commercials and some of them are funny and some of them are um, a lot of times put into them, but it's like, wow, this is just like all propaganda. Like this, like, there's very little that's said that's actually true, in these commercials. And again, there's like millions and millions and millions of dollars in studies on how to manipulate. It's like a form of hypnotism, how to manipulate. So the more you kind of look at it, the more fascinating it is. Of, it's like we may think we have an original idea, but that was intentionally implanted in our heads. And so, how do we really learn to quote unquote think for ourselves, right? How do we really come to a place where we can do that, um, and then do that collectively with a group of people? Um, so that feels like really it's. I mean, it may seem like maybe it's like not a sexy thing to talk about, but it really seems like it's like fundamental to if you want to change the world and create the new earth and all of these things. Like we got to be dealing with accurate information. And if we're not, then it's not gonna work out well. And again, there's people intentionally trying to give us inaccurate information, so it makes it more of a uh, of a challenge to get there. So a couple areas, just to give you like a couple basic examples. I mentioned 10 different areas, right? So if you think about um, like the financial realm, like investing, the people that are the best investors, they have the best, most accurate, up-to-date information, and the people that are the worst investors, they don't have the best, most accurate, up-to-date information, right? So that makes all the difference. You can know like the strategies, you can know like, all the you can have all the knowledge of how to do it, but if you don't have the right information, um, then it's not gonna work out as far as what you're trying to manifest. And you can bring it into any of the areas of that we talked about. Um, so that's something that I want to get more into, and we're kind of like building towards other things there. And then I'll just want to introduce something else tonight. So that's kind of like the getting external accurate information, right? But then there's a second part, which is internally, which you can think of like having the internal mirror be clear and clean to be able to receive the accurate information. So it's like two sides. It's like the information, how do you get that to be accurate? And then how are you able to even be able to discern if what you're how do you have the internal mirror clean enough to be able to perceive the information? So I'll give you a really classic example. This will be in the relationship realm. So you start dating someone, could be a man or a woman, and you um, have an idea of like how you think they are or they're going to be, or who they are, and then it turns out as you get to know them more, they're something completely different than what you were imagining they were going to be, right? In a bad way. So what you were imagining is not the case at all, right? And then you kind of look back and you're like, man, I actually saw the signs the whole time. Why wasn't I paying attention to the signs? I had this idea in my head of like what this person, who they were and what they were going to be. And I wasn't paying attention to the information that was coming at me that was telling me very clearly like who this person was, right? So that's an example that probably I think we all could probably relate to at some point in our lives. And this kind of stuff happens all the time where it's like we want things to be a certain way, we wish things would be a certain way, and then we're not perceiving the way things are, right? And this is really fascinating because so much of this work is actually using the power of your imagination. So you do want to imagine your future, you want to visualize your future, you want to envision it, but then you also need to be able to see things as they are, and you're kind of like working between the two, back and forth, back and forth. And so when we confuse the two, when we're imagining something, oh, I want it to be a different way, which is not the way it is, um, then we create suffering for ourselves and others. So how can we be able to perceive things as they are and see things exactly as they are, so we can actually be able to receive the information as it is accurately? So it's like the lens is clean and clear, and then the information coming in is clean and clear, and then we can all things are possible from that space, and we're coming in that space. So I'll just thought a couple things and then open it up to you guys. This actually brings us back to some of the beginning things we talked about. Like, I find that when I am let's say the more that I'm grounded and quiet and still inside, then the more I'm able to almost, if you think of it like be clear and clean inside to receive accurately the information, right? And the more that I may be agitated, the more I may be in some kind of a trauma response of fear or anxiety, um, then the less I'm able to receive information accurately. So this is, so you start to see how all these things are interconnected. So it's like, you may think of like, what's this have to do with like spirituality? Well, this is why it has to do with spirituality, because it's like, yeah, that's where the stillness, the be able to have that space inside where you're not, um, trauma is interesting because trauma is basically like something from the past is still being held on to, right? And when something from the past is still being held on to, then you can't see clearly. Now, I'm not, now, things happen in people's lives. I'm not saying people should not have trauma. People have trauma, and there's the compassion there, and we may have trauma, and there's a compassion for ourselves. But it's just the point of like, if you're in a trauma state, then you're holding on to something from the past that's not in the present, and so then you're not able to see things as they are. So, but when we can get into a space of deeper space of inner stillness, inner quietude, then the the what's being held on to naturally sort of opens. And so much of this, my work, whether it's through the breath work or the coaching or the retreats, is like being able to perceive, sometimes I call it innocence consciousness, like being able to perceive through innocence consciousness. And it's like looking at something with fresh eyes. So this is really big, like again, in the relationship realm. Like if you're with somebody you've been with for a long time, um, this is just another example, right? It's easy to be like, oh, same old thing. Oh, she always says the same. Why they always, oh, here we go again. I'm so tired of the same old. I'm bored. All this kind of stuff, right? So can we like look at somebody that we've known for a long time, our partner, our husband, our wife, or a family member? Can we look at them and look at them as if we're seeing them for the first time? See them with fresh eyes in this moment, and come from that innocence consciousness, and then we can see what's now. That oftentimes will bring up a sense of wonder and bring up a sense of amazement, bring up a sense of excitement, right? Because it's like there's there's this um there's this aliveness that like a child has. I always talk about how Jesus mentions the child, the being that conscious of the child. The child has that sense of wonder, that sense of aliveness to the moment, the innocence to the moment. But there's a second thing that can happen where you come with innocence and you're just like, wow, this isn't working at all. I wasn't even paying attention. So there is that side of it too. You don't always have a positive feeling when and that's why sometimes people will be more happy to go through the motions because they don't want to see things as they really are, you know? So you don't really know what you're going to see, but that's kind of the point. That's why you have the fresh eyes that look fresh to see what's here now and now and now and now and now, right? So again, there's like the external, what's externally coming in to get the accurate information. We can go a lot more into that. And now we're talking about what's happening internally to be clear and clean inside to receive the information accurately. So with that, I'll open it up to all of you. Questions, comments, reflections, inquiries.
What you're talking about really reminds me of what the Course in Miracles teaches. And I just started the workbook again. I studied Course in Miracles for 16 years and then just kind of put it aside. It was part of me, and I haven't gone back. But the first few workbook lessons are like, I'm not upset for the reason I think. And then there's another one, I'm not seeing things the way they are. And then finally it says, I'm seeing what I'm seeing is the past. And so the course is trying to teach you to see things in a fresh way without your preconceived notions coloring it. Be in the present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why the course leans heavily on forgiveness. Forgiveness is more like letting go of preconceived notions that you've had about somebody or something.
Yeah.
Robin, what's the background? What's the source of that course?
Oh, you haven't heard, huh?
No.
It's real interesting. You'll find it real interesting. The course, let's see, I'll make it quick. There was a couple who were very high up in psychology at Columbia University, and they were having so much trouble in their offices amongst all these psychologists, and the Thetford was the man's name who he spoke to his cohort one day and he said, "This is terrible. We should be knowing, we should know how to get along with people and how to work things out. You know, if anybody should, how come we don't?" He said, he goes, I'm going to find a way to solve this problem. And then the lady next to him said, "And I'm going to help you." And she just touched his leg or something and said, "I'm going to help you." And shortly after that, she started hearing the words in her mind, "This is a Course in Miracles, please take notes." And it was frightening to her because it was like something she wasn't asking for. And when she told her friend, he said, "Well, just tell me what it says. Let's write it down. Bring it to me. We'll read it over. If it's a bunch of hogwash, we'll throw it out." Well, eventually she asked, "Who is the voice?" And the voice said, "This is Jesus Christ." And she said, "What?" She goes, "I am an atheist Jewish lady. Why on earth would you choose me to write this?" And the voice said, "Because you're the only one who will do it." And so she just dictated. She just simply wrote down everything she heard. And it's sort of like a correction to maybe old theology. And it has a lot more to do with really loving others and not judging, and forgiveness. And but yeah, it's pretty interesting. I grew up in a Christian religion, so but it's very metaphysical actually too. It actually states that the world is a kind of an illusion that we're all experiencing, and that our purpose here now is to wake up from it.
Will is also somebody that's studied that pretty deeply, who we haven't seen in a few weeks, so hopefully he's
Yeah.
comes back around.
I miss him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's, well, we're recording this, so I won't say anything else.
All right, I'm gonna share, forcing myself to share.
Yay!
I hate sharing on Zoom. But your topic is so pertinent to my week that I have to share.
Great. We like when
I
people
have
share.
So I'm going to start off with talking briefly about an incident that occurred with a relationship, exactly what you're talking about, and then I'm going to end on the solution.
Okay.
At least what I believe the solution is, because we haven't really come to a solution. But anyway, had an experience with my neighbor who for a period of time, exactly what you said, Brian, we became really close friends. We both moved to Tennessee from out of town. And as soon as we become so close, I realize, wow, like some red flags here. But long story short, I go to give her a compliment on Monday night and she snaps at me. And all I said was, "Hey, it looks like you had a really good family visit over the weekend." Her family was here. And she just snapped and said, "I always have fun with my family." And I think she was being sensitive because she doesn't always get along with them. And I was genuinely happy that everything seemed smooth and I was complimenting her. And so she received the compliment through her lens, through her own perspective, through her own trauma. And then she twisted it to an insult somehow. And so I kind of just walked away like, okay, I was just trying to say I was happy for you. And I left. Later on in the week, it turned out into unfortunately, a huge blow up where I went in to check on her because she was working from home, which she doesn't do. And it, without going into detail again. So, exactly what you said is we receive through our own lens. And if we're holding on to trauma that we haven't released and we haven't done the inner work, we're going to perceive sometimes even people that love us and care for us and trying to be there as a negative. I mean, it literally blows my mind how this person can perceive it that way. And I wish she was on this Zoom. I mean, I live in a 3-unit barn dominium. She's literally like right over there. But anyway, I think that it's our responsibility to clean our lens, to do the inner work, to release the trauma, and also, undo the programming that we've all had from society, from the media, from family, from all these different programs to, deprogram ourselves and recognize that two people can receive the same amount of information, the same piece of information, and it can be a completely different message to them. So, thank you for this topic. And um, I don't know, it's also a lesson in me is how I respond when someone's screaming at me. And I probably got a B minus. I didn't get an A plus. So I have room to improve and staying calm and recognizing this person is sick. This person is ill, I am actually really sad for her. But anyway, it's really amazing topic. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for sharing. You bring up a really interesting another layer to it, which is I was talking about like cleansing the mirror in yourself. And then inevitably we're going to encounter other people who, maybe they're having a bad moment or they're having a bad day or they're having a bad life. But in any case, like we're going to encounter other people who are not coming from a clean, clear place inside, right? So kind of the next level is like I love the way you kind of like work through that and like, okay, they're coming at me like this, they have a trauma around this. This is what the trauma is about, and I can have compassion for that. Doesn't mean you need to be like close friends or anything, but you're able to like, in other words, like there's something called nonviolent communication. Some of you know about. Marshall Rosenberg is the founder of it, and it's basically a communication skills, how to communicate with other people. And so um, it's not only about your own communication of like when you're talking, right? But actually like your ability to listen to other people. So sometimes somebody will be just they'll just be so clear and it's like, oh, that was really easy to understand what you're saying. And sometimes somebody's coming from a trauma state, right? And they call it like translating. So, like somebody may become, maybe they're coming at you in an aggressive way, or you feel like you're kind of being like attacked, and it's like um, the guy that taught me, Steve Torme, he calls it like Jedi level, right? Like, can you like hear that and translate that to like, okay, this is what they're really feeling, this is what they're really needing, actually, right? This is what's really going on for them. So it felt like you were able to do that, and you're kind of able to like hone into like why she's saying what she's saying and what's going on deeper for her. And I think in
Yeah.
this world, that's something that we'll probably need to do a lot because there's a lot of people that are
Yeah.
having a hard time and, you know, communicate from a place that's not clear and clean inside.
It makes me think of the four agreements. One being not to
Things
take
personally.
things personally. Yeah,
Yeah.
take offense. Yep,
Yeah.
and that book is amazing for
Yeah.
anybody who hasn't read it. Oh my God. It's helped me so much because I used to be very sensitive and I would really take things personally. And um, now I'm learning more. It has to do with that person more than me. Although I do want to be open to the fact that um, maybe I was being aggressive or something. I don't want to not look at myself, but
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about interpersonal relationships is it's it's different in other but in the interpersonal relationship, it's not right or wrong. It's like if somebody feels like, you know, you're being insensitive, for example. Well, that's how they feel. Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong. That's how they feel,
yeah.
right? So it's like if it's somebody that we care about, then we're gonna take the time to sit and listen and come to a place of mutual understanding together. And here's why I'm saying here's why I said what I said. Here's what I was feeling. Here's what the need is, the desire is. What were you feeling? What was your need? What was your desire? Um, yeah, coming to a place of each person feeling seen and heard. But that's like a classic um, in an interpersonal relationship. It's like I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. You know,
Mhm.
like it's not really the point. I think Geo has something profound to share.
I did want to share this quote by Marcus Aurelius. It kind of reminded me. I think Stoicism talks a lot about uh, not worrying about like what other people think of you and how other people act. And there's this one quote. It said, "The wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of this of the divine." So, kind of when I think about that, I feel like a lot of times we forget that other people also have that divine spark in them as well. Like other people also have a soul. And it's easy to get caught up in this like divisiveness where this person's separate from me and I don't know why they're saying this to me. I don't know why they're doing this. I don't know, who do they think they are, so forth and so forth, right? But we forget that they're also a person. They have their own past, they have their own traumas, they have their own reasons for saying the things they do. And instead of being very combative and being somebody who gets very defensive, which is easy, because, as humans, we're very emotional. We were very, we care a lot about our pride, about our self-esteem. And so if somebody says something to us that we don't like, then it's easy to get combative and aggressive and all these things, right? But when you can actually see that this person has that divine spark in them as well, and they just have their own lives, they have their own struggles, they have their own things they're going through, and you have to also think back to those days where you were in a bad mood and you had, you didn't feel a certain way, and you might have treated somebody badly as well, even though you probably regret doing that, or you probably feel sorry for doing that in the past. But you also have to put yourself in the shoes of that other person, right? And it's not to say that you shouldn't have self-respect and you shouldn't, um, you know, uh, defend yourself, and speak up for yourself in situations. You should always have self-respect. You should always, stand up for yourself. But what it does mean is that you should always try to see other people, for where they're coming from and their experiences they had, because that's something I've done in the past where I would say, oh, this person's so negative, this person's so mean, this person's so that. And I would never give them grace to understand where they come from, what traumas they have, where their perspective is. And when I would give that, not only did it help me to treat that person better, but it also allowed me to be more calm within myself and to not get so agitated, to not get so angry because I could say, okay, I see where they're coming from. I kind of understand, why they're acting the way they are. And again, it's not to excuse that action, but it's to have a forgiveness and a better understanding, And I think even Christianity has principles like this where it talks about forgiveness, and it talks about, as you were saying, like having that childlike. I think Jesus says, like, if you do not act like a child, you not enter the kingdom of heaven, right? So it's like I feel like having that sense of seeing people instead of having this preconceived notion of like, oh yeah, because they act this way, this is who they are, or sometimes even before somebody acts a certain way, we cast all these judgments on them. But I think it's important to like return to that state of like trying to understand the person instead of trying to label them and trying to attack them and trying to do all these things, because again, we all come from that same divine spark. And I think when you remember that, when you remember everyone has a soul, everyone's here for a certain purpose, you don't get caught in that same divisiveness. It's you can kind of see, okay, this is another soul, this is another being that I'm talking to, and they have this thing that they're going through. They have this reason for acting the way they are, and I have to understand it. I have to be aware of that, and try to mind my own, not mind my own business, but realize that this person is the way they are, and you can only do what you can do with yourself. You can only act, the way you are with yourself. You can't change the way other people are going to be in certain situations. You can't expect people to act certain ways in certain situations. So, Stoicism talks a lot about basically focusing on what's in your control, not always worrying about what's outside of your control, because not only does that cause a lot of suffering, um, but it just leads to, negative emotions, right? So when you're dealing with other people, it's important to recognize, again, not only where they come from, but also realize like, hey, I can only do what I can do. And this person is the way they are. And whether that comes to relationships, whether that's intimate relationships, dealing with people who may not be the right fit for you, and you can't expect to change them, or it could just be in your day-to-day interactions and friends or whatnot. You have to realize that, these people are the way they are. And sometimes you just have to learn how to navigate that the best you can and not expect things to be different, because you sometimes you can't change other people, and you really shouldn't be going into relationships hoping to change other people either, I don't think.
Thanks, G. Good
That's
stuff.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to add to what Giovanni said. I've heard some people who are really good. I cannot say I've ever done this, but if they feel like they've rubbed somebody the wrong way and that person really reacts at them, they can actually go into a curious mode and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. How did I come across just now? Tell me more."
Mhm.
So, I
Well,
haven't mastered that, but
to take it even a step further, um, Jesus used the metaphor of a splinter in, you see a splinter in your neighbor's eye, and he cautioned us to remove the log that's in our eye before we try to remove the splinter that's in somebody else's eye. So he, like I say, he even took it the step further where we should look at ourselves first prior to thinking that the problem's all on the other side. Um, and he didn't say remove the splinter in your eye so you could remove the splinter in the other person's eye. He called it a log or a plank in your own eye. So, that's an interesting admonition to just kind of assume that we're not seeing things always very clearly either, and that we should examine ourselves prior to just assuming that there's an issue on the other side.
Yeah. I think projection is so common. People projecting their own stuff onto particularly like public figures, you know, um, celebrities or politicians or athletes or you know, like that's a major one where it's like it's easy to just kind of put all the stuff that's inside you onto some public figure and you know then you're not the one that's responsible for it. So yeah. A couple other things that came up that I want to share. Three things actually. So one is I don't remember what the third one is actually. Oh, the one is if someone's like going through something like you know we're getting to like personal relationship stuff, interpersonal relationship stuff now. Someone's going through something intense. Um, this is like simple, but really like the best way and the only way to connect because someone's not going to receive your advice or your input or your telling them what to do if they don't feel connected to you, right? So just just to ask them what they're feeling or to connect to what they're feeling, right? If you can connect to what they're feeling, then you help them to connect to what they're feeling. And if they can connect to what they're feeling, it's this whole paradox, right? Of like actually when you can embrace your sadness or your anger or what, you know, then it actually allows you to you feel more grounded, you know, and especially if you feel like someone else is present with you and they're kind of like holding the space for you, quote unquote. Um, so that's like the way to kind of create the connection, and then you can kind of go other places from there, and you know, then they feel like, oh, he hears me or she hears me, like they she he understands he you know that's kind of the starting point then for creating that connection. I do think it's valuable to what people often call boundaries. It's good to have boundaries in this kind of space. So I think that's important to state. So, like for example, like if someone came in here and they started calling people names or threatening violence to people, like those are things that wouldn't be permitted, which is fortunately has never happened and I don't think ever will happen. But you know, that's generally like I wouldn't allow that into my level of community. Like if someone was is upset with me, that's totally, you know, obviously that's okay, or maybe it's not obvious, but that's okay, and we can like talk about that. But if they go into like name calling or this kind of stuff, then that's not something that's going to be permitted. So it's good to like have those kind of boundaries, and maybe someone gets upset and they forget the boundaries, then you remind them. You know, this is especially good with kids if you have children, you know, certain ways you communicate, certain ways you don't communicate doesn't mean you're not acknowledging the feelings. Actually, you can communicate the feelings better if you communicate them in a more conscious, intentional way and be heard in a more conscious, intentional way, right? So I think some guidelines for communication is valuable and important to stand by. And then this last part I think is really fascinating. Um, and it's a challenge, but it's kind of everything. So when you're interacting with somebody, so I would say this is my question to myself interacting with somebody. It's like, and I'm sort of holding two places at the same time. It's like, can I see them exactly as they are, and can I also see the highest and best version of themselves, even if they don't see it or they're not capable of seeing it, and being able to hold both of those, because I think a lot of times we'll hold one without the other. Like it's like, oh, I see the best in that in this person, and you know they're treating you horribly and they're like destroying everyone's life around you, and it's like, well, you should probably see the way they are, you know. Um, and then we may see the way someone is, but we're not seeing the best in them, so then we can't help to elevate them to a higher place inside themselves. So I think that's the place is like, can you hold both places? And that doesn't mean that this is important to state too. It doesn't mean that someone you may be able to see someone as they are and be like, I cannot deal with this person, interact with this person. I don't want anything to do with them. And also within yourself, be praying for the highest and best for them. Does that make sense? So it doesn't mean that like you have to like hang out with them or sleep in the same bed as them. Um, but internally, like you're holding the vision inside yourself. um, for them, you know. So sometimes there may be cases where it's like, you know, there's threats of violence and you need to get away, but you can still have that space. In other cases, it might not be necessary. You can be still interacting with somebody and holding that vision. Yes, Antonio.
Thanks. I just wanted to add, listening to what's being said, interacting with others, and again, just from my experience, I had to reteach myself in interacting with others. No, but this wasn't taught um, to me how to actually really listen. I discovered that what I had been doing for a very long time, and I think a lot of people do this. Um, the way I describe it is, the difference between listening with your head and listening with your heart. Um, and in my family, it happens a lot. Within my family, I don't know if it happens to you where, especially with the people close to you who you've spent so much time with, that you're trying to say something. And one of the classic signs that this is happening is when they don't let you finish what you're saying. You get interrupted. And so I found in teaching myself how to listen, um, when you listen with your head, you're actually not listening to the other person. You're actually listening to your own head. Your ego is speaking to you in your mind, preparing to answer something or reply something. You're not actually really, really, listening to the other person. You're paying more attention to yourself, to the dialogue inside your head about what they're saying and preparing a reply. I actually had to the way I saw it visualized, it actually was like rewire my ears, and to really pay attention to somebody, to really be present and pay all of my attention to somebody instead of paying attention to myself, because that's what I think happens a lot when interacting with others. And again, this happens to me all the time still, not only with family members but with other people, where I'll be in the middle of something and they will cut in and interrupt and either start rebuking what I'm saying or say, try to finish or pretend that they know what I was trying to say, or some other form of interruption. So I think that happens a lot. And actually learning to fully listen to somebody else, to actually pay attention and to not be in that, internal dialogue in your own mind, listening to yourself or preparing an answer. So I just wanted to throw that out there, to really learn to listen to another is something that I had to train myself to do. And I still struggle with it. I sometimes catch myself when I'm interacting with somebody, and all of a sudden I realize I'm actually, talking to myself or listening or preparing a reply or preparing, and so I have to pay a lot of attention to be present and to really actually listen to what the other person is saying. And when you do that, I found that when I developed that, the level of communication went, because I started to really hear into what they were saying, trying to, get a lot more information than when I was distracted listening to the thoughts in my head as somebody was trying to tell me something. So learning to actually listen for me has been, a challenge and become very important.
Thanks, Antonio, for sharing. Yeah, I think listening is the key. That's one of the things I say a lot is listening is more important than speaking. In fact, those who come to the retreats that I facilitate, we usually have an opening circle and everyone introduces themselves and shares. And I always say this is a listening exercise, not a speaking exercise. Um, because it is. It's like that's the most because like if people are talking but no one's listening, then you might as well not even be talking, right? So the listening is the fundamental component. And one of the things I would just add one other thing is there's listening to other people, and then which is this is like a form of mindfulness, right? Like being attentive to the moment is listening to other people when they're speaking, and then also listening to yourself. That's the other component too. So when we are speaking, listening to ourselves speak, and it's like listening to, is this something that is good medicine for the person listening? Is this something that's beneficial for them? Is this something that they're interested in, it's something that they're curious about. So just having that attentiveness to listen to others when they're speaking and listening to ourselves when we're speaking, and then we can have pretty amazing dialogue and conversation from that space.
There's actually an exercise that I learned to do with my ex-husband, with a therapist. It was called reflective listening, or some people call it parroting, where the first person will say what they're thinking, what they feel, and then the other person will say, "So what I hear you saying is," and then you kind of repeat what they said, but in your own words. And then that gives that person a chance to say, "Yeah, that's it," or "No, no, not quite that." And it's really wonderful. It's so effective to do with somebody.
And he put that in the chat as well. I have a client named James who's here. He's been here a couple times in the past, and he's having really powerful breakthroughs with his wife using that exercise, the reflective listening exercise, and they really feel like they're coming into deeper levels of connection and communion through that practice.
Yeah, because
Uh,
they say the thing that
uh,
makes somebody so frustrated is that they don't feel like they're being heard.
Totally.
But when you do that, it's real effective. Yeah.
Takes longer, but it's worth it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Gio?
yeah, one thing when Antonio was talking, I kind of thought of another thing that kind of relates back to Stoicism is also just having emotional control. And that actually really helps you in your relationships more than you think it does. Because a lot of times, like when people think of emotional control, they think it's just about yourself. Like it's just about, I need to manage my stress better, or I need to like, not get so angry or not get so sad all the time. I need to find out how to regulate my emotions more and handle my stress better and find better coping strategies, right? But also there's a relational aspect to that emotional control. And what I've realized in my own personal life is that when it comes to things like disagreements or arguments or anything that might come up in relationships, if you are the calmer person, this actually kind of reminds me, Dad, of something Pops used to tell me when I was younger. And he said, "Be the better man." And I still have that in the back of my head, even nowadays. Whenever I'm in an argument or something with somebody, I always try to be emotionally stable. I always try to be emotionally calm. I always try to be even calmer than the other person. And I think that's something that a lot of people um, don't put enough emphasis on because they think that the way that they should act is they should win the argument. They should have the right answer. They should, try to, there's all this pride, all this personal, things that you want to say. You want to say your point. You want to be right all the time, right? But I think again, it's listening to the other person, and it's not just listening to them to hear their point, but it's also because you want to show that you care and you want to you want to have compassion for them. You want to have empathy for what their opinion is, who they are as a person, what their perspective is, and then you can give feedback on that and share your perspective as well. But if you never let the other person talk, and if you are constantly in an angry state, then you're going to make things worse in the situation. It doesn't matter if they're also angry, or if they're angry. If they're angry, it's even more of a reason for you to be calm. It's even more of a reason for you to be in a state of peace, because that will be better off in that relationship than you also being angry, you also making the situation worse than it needs to be. So again, it comes back to that idea of like you only have control over yourself. So if you're in an argument with somebody, if you're in a disagreement with somebody, try to be as calm as possible. Try to be the person who can bring things down a bit, because as humans, we get very emotional. We get very neurotic sometimes. So it's like you have to have the ability to help to bring the other person down, because when you're stressed, other people can also feel that. When you're angry, also, it's a vibrational thing. And so if you can bring yourself down to a peaceful state, to a calmer state, then the other person will start to mirror that. Because another thing too is in neuroscience, they actually found that there's these things called mirror neurons. So mirror neurons, they will mimic what the other person's doing, the emotions the other person's feeling, the state that the other person's in. So it's just a reminder, to try to be the better person in those arguments, try to be the calmer person, try to be the person who, and that's again, it doesn't mean have pride or try to be right, but it just means, be the better listener, be the calmer person, be the person who's looking for the solution and so forth.
This is a very rich subject, this emotional realm. This is something I feel like we've been exploring for years, and it just gets like richer and richer and richer. Like there's so much here. Um, so I think I would use the term emotional intelligence as opposed to being calm. So kind of being aware of your emotional energy as it's moving. And there's so many things to say, but like first off, some people, their natural state is more emotional. Some people, their natural state is less emotional, right? So I don't think it's bad to be emotional. I don't think it's good to be non-emotional. I just think it's two different personality types. Women tend to be, generally speaking, there's exceptions, but they tend to be more emotional than men. Men tend to be less emotional. I don't think one is like good or bad or one's better than the other. It's just a different way of being in the world, right? And then even culturally, certain cultures they're more emotional. Certain cultures are less emotional. It's something that Annie and I talk about a lot because um, coming from the Italian culture, it's very emotional. It's just normal. Like people are like yelling at each other in the street, and it's just, throwing their hands up, and it's just like this is just like just everyday life. And then the Scandinavian culture is very like subdued and quiet, and you know, someone to raise their voice is like really strange. So it's like there's all these differences with like emotion. Um, so I think it's more like being conscious and aware of emotion and not being emotionally reactive, right? I think that's more the point, Gio, that I think you're making is not being emotionally reactive, but also being in touch with your emotion and being in touch and noticing if something makes you feel upset, something makes you feel sad, something makes you feel empathy, something makes you feel joyful. All of this is like our emotional guidance. So I don't think the goal is not to feel emotion. I think the goal is to be able to like really be with emotion. And there's sort of um, like a stillness or a peace that's underneath the emotions. In other words, when you're really fully with the emotion and present with the emotion that's arising in a space, there is peace there. So it's like this interesting phenomenon, right? When you're fully with the emotion, there is a peace that transcends the emotion. But when you resist the emotion, you know, like one of the worst things to do is like I remember seeing a it was like advice on Facebook or something, and it said one of the worst things you can do is tell a woman to calm down, which I totally agree with that. I think that's a major mistake. Um, but really telling anybody to calm down, right, when they're upset is not going to work. It's about like being with what somebody's feeling, and if they can feel like you're really present with what they're feeling, and you are present with what they're feeling, that creates that feeling of connection, that creates the feeling of love, and then there's some kind of like, you know, because emotion is just a temporary wave. It's not permanent, right? And I think that's really good for us to realize in ourselves. Like when we're feeling something, it's like if you're having a day where you're feeling like depressed or you're feeling whatever, low vibration or whatever, it's just temporary. It's good to inquire into why is that? Is there something that I need to do? Is there something that I need, it's leading you in a certain direction, but it's not something that's permanent. I think that's really important to realize that and that's also like joyful feelings, ecstatic feelings, all temporary. It's oscillating. It's like the weather. It's always changing. Um, so that kind of wisdom really actually allows you to be more grounded. And I think that tends to happen as you get older too. You sort of seen it before. So you don't take it. It's not as big of a deal. So that's wisdom that comes over time.
Another thing is to, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody that you know is going to be, it's going to be difficult, is to make sure you use good timing. Because, I
Yes.
found that in the evening when you're really tired, it's just a really bad time to talk about anything that's controversial or, upsetting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Just-
it's actually good to actually ask. It's just a good time to, talk about this, or just, I have something, blah, blah, blah. It's just a good time for you. Yeah. Instead of just springing on somebody when they're in the middle of something. Yeah. I totally agree that's find the right time when both parties can be fully present together.
Mhm.
Did somebody else start to say something there? Was I imagining that? Well, I think we can wrap it up. Anyone have any closing words of wisdom?
Is it your birthday, Brian?
My birthday is Monday.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Zenith Prime just wished you a happy birthday.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you, Zenith Prime.
happy
Yeah,
birthday.
just a few days away. Yep. Every moment we're born again, potentially, to see with fresh, innocent new eyes. There's the wisdom to close us out. Every day we're reborn. Every moment we're reborn with fresh, innocent eyes, the potential to have the innocence consciousness to see things fresh, be cleansed with a clean, open state of awareness, and be able to perceive things as they are, while also imagining the highest and best for all that we encounter. Amen. Thank you all for being here. See you next time.
Okay.
Amen.
Have a
Peace.
great week.
Amen.
Thank
Nice. Love
you.
that.